Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast, the podcast dedicated to simplifying the commercial real estate industry for the masses. Each week, we sit down with industry experts to dissect the many facets of commercial real estate and extract valuable lessons you can apply to your business. Whether you're a new or seasoned business owner or investor, the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast will be your go-to resource for all your commercial real estate needs. Now, here are your hosts, Raphael Collazo and Jeff Walston.
Welcome to Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast. I'm your host, Raphael Collazo, here with my co-host, Jeff Walston. How's it going, my friend?
It's going great, man. Wonderful day outside. I am sailing through. The commercial construction has just been ramping up. Definitely wanting to see how the last two quarters go. So I'm grateful for the first two right now. And kind of living life. I'm actually going back to school, believe it or not, to kind of hone my craft in a sense. And I'll give out little tidbits as the podcast keeps putting out episodes. So if you keep listening, maybe at the, from the first one to the fifth one, you might be able to figure out what I'm doing. So excited about that. But what about you, Raphael? How about you?
Doing great. Yeah, and you kind of mentioned it briefly to me the other day, so I'm excited for your continuing education, and similar to you, I've been trying to work towards finalizing my CCIM designation as well, and I'm hopeful that in the next several months I'll be able to secure that as well. So the name of the game is continuous improvement, and obviously that's something we're definitely committed to, and also the individual that we talked to today, just a phenomenally insightful individual and very impressive individual who is committed to continuous improvement. His name's Scott Sidman. He's the EVP, or the Executive Vice President of Bldg Inc., which is a technology solution for larger institutions that for the operation of commercial real estate. And so, he has a very diverse background, and that's one of the things we kind of touched on early on in the podcast. He came from originally, the restaurant and then hospitality space. As you mentioned, he kind of got a little burned out from having to deal with, all that comes along with the hospitality industry. And he decided to kind of go off on his own and pursue other entrepreneurial endeavors, was able to build a successful company in the janitorial and maintenance space, and then eventually sold off that interest. And over the last 18 to 20 years, he's really been involved with a company that we talked about, which is Bldg Engines. It's a technology solution that he's involved with several individuals that was eventually sold to JLL. And they've been partnering with them for the last several years. So, some of the things we talked about within this podcast episode is, the evolution of technology since they started back in 2001. He kind of documented a lot of the things that he's been seeing over the last 20 years that he's been in the business, and how technology has evolved over that period of time. We touched on exactly what Bldg Engines is the solution. They also have a newer solution that they've been implementing within the broader landscape, which is called Prism. It's essentially a rewrite of the original system that now incorporates a lot of different technologies through the use of APIs, and providing just a more comprehensive solution to their clientele. And then finally, we touched on some of the ways that the system is able to help them improve the NOI of each of the properties of the clients that they're servicing, and then where he sees PropTech going in the future, and some of the cool things that he thinks are going to occur over the next 5 to 10 years. So, I found the discussion extremely insightful, and Scott's just an impressive individual, and I'm just really, really glad we were able to sit down and speak with him. Jeff, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Oh, you kind of definitely ran down the discussion. I just wanted to throw out his excitement. Like, he's been doing this since 2001, and the excitement of how the tech is now, and the future of tech and where it's going to go. You can just tell that this guy's like, he's passionate about it, and I can't wait for you guys to listen to what he has to say. And
Absolutely.
Also for all of you who gave us 2 thumbs up, essentially the 5 stars and ratings and everything, we greatly appreciate that. Keep it up. At the time you get done in this introduction, please pause it real quick, and if you can get us a 5-star review, we would greatly appreciate it. But yeah, can't wait for you to listen.
Absolutely. And I'll echo that as well. I mean, as I always say, we continue to see significant upticks in our downloads as a result of you guys leaving 5-star reviews. So if you guys don't mind taking a second right now and just leaving us a 5-star review, it would mean the absolute world to us. And we obviously greatly appreciate everything you guys do for the podcast and, your continued support over the last year or so that we've been doing this thing. So again, thank you all so much. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right into this podcast. Well, hey, Scott, great to see you this fine afternoon.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming on the show. Absolutely.
My pleasure.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I think, where you're tuning in from, obviously your background looks like you're in somewhere tropical, but in reality, I'm sure that's not the case, but.
Yeah, I am located these days just outside of Boston. When I'm in the office, we're located in downtown Boston as our corporate headquarters.
Mm-hmm.
But like a lot of folks these days, I'm in there sparingly or periodically.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's similar to us. I mean, we've and brokerage inherently is not necessarily, it depends on which brokerage you're at, but you don't necessarily have to be in the office all the time. And so I've kind of had the flexibility of being able to work from home even prior to COVID. And now since, COVID is, kind of getting, in a better situation, you'd hope, now I'm almost more likely to go to the office because I just want to get out of my house. I feel like that's a lot of people are that way. And, really just we're honored to have you. And we're really excited to dive into, a variety of different topics today. I know your background, you do have a background in technology as well, and particularly in the technology space for commercial real estate. So, I'm really excited to kind of dive in and learn a little bit more about your story. So what we typically do when we first interview people on the podcast is we like to learn a little bit more about the person that's across the table from us. So if you don't mind kind of sharing your backstory, I think that'd be awesome.
Sure. Yeah, given my age, it can be extensive, so I'll try to condense it for you and be as brief as possible. But I've had I guess what would be characterized as a non-traditional or non-linear career path, particularly for where I'm at today. I think when you look at a lot of people who are in technology or commercial real estate technology, they've had either a technology sort of track or a commercial real estate track that brought them to where they are in their current career position. Mine was a little bit different. I started my career in the hospitality industry. So out of college, I worked for Four Seasons Hotels, and then I worked for Intercontinental Hotels, and did that for into my mid to late 20s. And then like a number of people do in the hospitality space, you can get kind of burnt out in that business or realize you've been doing it for a long time. In my particular case, I came from a family background of working in hospitality, restaurant business, and worked since I was like 13 years old, started as a dishwasher and worked my way all the way up through college and did all that sort of stuff. And you do it long enough and you get a little bit burnt out, and decided I wanted to do something different. So from there, I embarked on more of an entrepreneurial path. I think it was the combination of being burnt out a little bit in that category and also feeling like I wanted to do my own thing. I always, maybe, when you're younger, I was a little bit arrogant and thought that I could do things better than everybody else, and figured I'd go out and try it and do it myself. So started a few different companies, one of which eventually led towards where I am today, because I was a partner in a janitorial mechanical services firm. So we were a vendor in selling to the commercial real estate space. And we built a nice mid-sized company here in the Boston area, built it up to a couple of hundred employees, servicing small, medium-sized commercial real estate firms, and got to understand who the buyers were, what their needs were, how they ran their businesses, what was important to them in terms of doing their day-to-day job, and spent a number of years doing that. And then from there, I had a few other ventures. I did, long story that's not worth going into, but I had a consulting business that worked in South America, and particularly in Brazil, and did some work there for a number of years, helping U.S. companies who were looking to do business in South America and in Brazil make connections. And then we did some work there for a major beer brewing company called Brahma, as they were building micropubs in Brazil. We were sourcing the equipment for them and here in the United States. So I was doing those things, kind of building my career. And then I had an old friend who started a technology company, in the late 1990s, and it aligned with my hospitality background. And he said, I'm starting a tech business, need some help here, just need to understand, who the buyer is and how to position what we're doing with them. And can you help me do that? And that kind of, drove the technology bug, and got really excited about helping him. And we had helped him raise some money, position the product. Eventually he sold the assets and the technology to someone else, but that was pretty exciting and interesting. And then he was the same guy who actually had the original idea for building engines. And interestingly, for background, he came from a construction background. So his business was working for real estate firms in Boston. He was doing kind of building envelope work, as well as some tenant improvement work in the commercial real estate space. And his frustration was working with his customers and managing the information flow for things like change orders and problem resolution and doing all those sorts of things. So we came up with the original concept for building engines to say, well, why don't I do what I did in my other business, kind of leverage technology to solve a business problem that I'm feeling.
Yeah.
And went to a few people to both present the idea, try to raise some money. He put in his own money, and he was connected with the co-founder who eventually became the driving force behind the business, a guy named David Osborne. And they were brought together and they started building engines. And then similar story, asked me to come in as a consultant, help build, go to market, and you understand how to talk to real estate people, and can you help us figure this out? And that was in 2004 when I first joined the business. So
Nice.
That's amazing.
There's definitely a big disconnect. You guys are definitely solving a huge problem there of the communication aspect, because it's not just the communication of just a straight line thing, right? There's also it's almost like a different language, a different type of talk, because we all know in the construction field, we can talk all day long with our dialect in construction, but then when you try to transfer that over to a commercial real estate agent, it's like there's always a little bit of the disconnect there. So
absolutely. Information gets lost, and like most things in that weren't done with technology in the past, they're idiosyncratic, right? And if you're trying to build a business, you need things to be consistent. You need insight and visibility and information and data and all the things, good things that come out of it. So they started there, and small idea that grew into something pretty substantial and evolved over time. It actually transitioned from solving that construction pain point that he was experiencing to more of being the central operations platform and vehicle for property management. So for everything that goes on in the building, it kind of evolved into that.
Definitely. No. And it's interesting to hear your background, not having been directly into the commercial real estate space to start off with. And, we've had the privilege of interviewing a lot of different people across the nation that coming from a variety of different backgrounds. And a lot of them, a big percentage of those individuals didn't directly start right in the commercial real estate industry. And a lot of the times that we talk to these individuals, they mention how their previous experiences have positively impacted how they approach day-to-day problems, going forward. And I'm sure in the hospitality space, having been in the restaurant space, I was in the restaurant space, early on in my, through high school and then in college as well. And I managed a restaurant for a little bit as well. I can't tell you the invaluable experiences that I gained from just being in those types of roles. And then obviously coming from the tech background, that's been invaluable too, in particular when it comes to breaking down complex systems and problems into component parts so that you can solve things a little bit more efficiently, as opposed to looking at a big elephant and saying, how are we going to solve this? Right. So, it's been interesting. So go ahead, Scott. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, certainly been helpful for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I realize that you're talking mostly about commercial. Was there ever a time that you even thought about residential, or is that even came into your mind or anything like that? So
we've certainly thought about it, and we actually have a significant amount of residential or multifamily in particular properties on the platform. By nature of our customers, as we grow over time, many of our customers have diversified asset classes right in their portfolios. So we have a significant amount of multifamily units, in the thousands as part of
nice.
our platform, but we don't typically market to that. There's subtle differences. And one of the things you learn about real estate is that it's a very big term, and the nuance and the differences between the classes and the types and markets and everything can be pretty significant in terms of the way they operate. So we know we're a really good fit for multi-tenant commercial office, for industrial. And industrial for us, we have to be distinct there. It's like warehouse and distribution centers, not manufacturing, right? And then retail. And even with retail, for us, it's open air shopping centers, lifestyle centers, grocery store anchored, kind of strip mall type of properties, as opposed to enclosed malls or quick serve restaurants or chains and things like that, because they just operate slightly differently. And even though you'll look at the tools they need and like, well, we need a work order system, or we do preventive maintenance, but the data model, the information architecture, the workflows, everything can be really different between those. So we've learned where we're really strong and fit, and where we're not. So.
Yeah. And I'm sure that was an iterative process over time. Like you mentioned, you guys have been doing it for 18 years now, right? Is that correct? Or somewhere in that range?
Yeah. Official product went to market in 2001. So 21.
Oh, yeah. That's crazy. Which in technology is a lifetime. I mean, that's unbelievable that you guys have been able to operate at that level for that long. And so, like you said, I think that, and this is something that I've learned just through being in the business over the last several years. I've been in the brokerage business for about 3 years now. And so learning those nuances of the business are, it's a job in and of itself. And then taking what about those different facets of that industry and then saying, how can I design something that from a technological standpoint to meet that need in and of itself is a completely different, problem that needs to be solved. And it's an iterative process over time. And, I'm sure over the years you've had, to change things around to accommodate new things that have come to light. And so, it's kind of interesting to hear you say that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the things I wanted to ask you, and this is something we kind of talked a little bit offline, was related to, what are the reasons you think that, and this has obviously changed over the last maybe 5 to 10 years. You've definitely seen a lot more technology adoption, in the commercial real estate space. But why do you think historically, this commercial real estate industry has been slow to adopt technology within its ranks? And then, how has that changed? Have you seen it over time? Maybe you just could kind of give an evolution of what you've seen over the last maybe 21 years of you guys operating.
Sure. Had a lot of time to observe that and suffered the bruises along the way to learn the lessons. I think fundamentally, it's because real estate has operated successfully for eons the same way, right? And they've done fine. And, real estate companies, real estate developers, managers, right, brokers, everybody has run their business and done that exceptionally well. So you start with that, and you start with that level of understanding. And when you're trying to sell a solution to an industry that's for the most part has been doing fine on their own, it can be challenging. I think what's happened within the industry though over the past 20 years and the impact in things that have had an impact on changing that mindset a little bit has been things like more institutional ownership of real estate, right? So whereas real estate for many years was dominated regionally or run regionally by family-run businesses or by individual investors and things like that, as institutions started to become more prevalent and take ownership stakes, the requirement and the things for like reporting and data and information drove the need for technology. The only way you can do that at scale is to put technology in place, right? Underwriting requirements. Now there's legislative issues for things like energy and sustainability and ESG reporting and all those kinds of things. All of those elements over time have contributed to that. And then there's been the tenants themselves or occupiers, whether it's multifamily or commercial space, saying, frankly, I don't want to call, I do everything else on my phone and online. I don't want to call the management office. I don't want to call and speak to somebody. I want an app. I want a product. I want visibility. I want accountability. And those combination of factors have impacted every single area of real estate, from brokerage, from construction and development, design, all the way through to brokerage and operating for the full asset life cycle of an asset.
Definitely.
And we're still early. We're still really early.
Oh, absolutely. And we've had the honor to interview a few other gentlemen that kind of echoed that same sentiment. And one of the big things that they talked about in particular and there's a gentleman we interviewed, Jeremy Neuer, who's a broker in New Jersey. And he mentioned he's a big advocate for commercial real estate technology, in particular prop tech. And he was mentioning how a lot of, the owners that he operates with now are starting to realize that, tenants are starting to demand, more comprehensive tech stack when they're looking for buildings to occupy. And so from a landlord's perspective, it behooves them to consider these types of opportunities a lot more early in the process now than just pushing it down the road, because at some point in time, that's going to become the norm. And if you don't adopt technology to kind of facilitate that, you're going to be left in the dust. And, along with what you mentioned about institutions, I mean, anytime you scale anything, you're going to need to be able to have some form of structure in place to be able to, manage all the processes that you just mentioned. I agree with your assessment of that matter as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Hard to do it otherwise in any business.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
So I know earlier you kind of touched base and kind of dove a little bit down into what building engines actually is. Can you give a more in-depth description of what you do and how you can say you're selling it to a client? Can you give us the rundown of that?
Sure. Yeah. So at our core, we define ourselves as an operating platform for commercial real estate. And if you think about the tech stack, kind of the emerging tech stack in a commercial real estate asset, right? In particular, it's evolved over the past several years. The foundational layer, once the building's been acquired or developed, always is accounting, right? So you have to put an accounting system in place. There's some dominant players in that category, in that foundational layer of the tech stack. Companies that have been around for a long time. There's some newer entries into the space, but it's kind of dominated by a few dominant key players, particularly in commercial real estate and in multifamily as well. Then from there, it's, okay, now I have to fill space, right? I've got to manage the brokerage, the leasing process, the marketing of the space. And that layer of the tech stack in the middle is companies from, CoStar at one end, who's, kind of the 800-pound gorilla of data and information and relative important to brokers and leasing and marketing people. And then there's a company like VTS, who's become the de facto tool that brokers use, right, for managing their sales process. And those two tend to dominate that layer of this tech stack. Above that is where we think we fit. And that's the operating layer. That's everything that goes on a day-to-day basis between tenants, management companies, the vendors, the suppliers, the people that work in a building, right? Everything that happens within the four walls of the building on a day-to-day basis. That's the operating layer. And it includes functional elements like service request management, preventive maintenance, operational risk items like certificate of insurance tracking and incident reporting, and all these things that a management team needs to do on a daily basis and stay in close contact with their constituents in the building and the people that service the building, right? And historically, they were done paper, pencil, idiosyncratic processes, telephone calls, faxes, everything else. We've consolidated all those things into functional areas and modules and capabilities that we can deploy in a building. We capture the data, manage the workflows, communications, notifications, billing elements. We share information back to the accounting systems, right? So it becomes a really seamless kind of process for the end user. And we do that through a platform today that we call Prism. Again, we're a 21-year-old company. We have a legacy product that was out there for years. It was called Building Engines, one product, one price. We lovingly refer to it as Building Engines Classic. And we have over 3.5 billion square feet, 40,000 buildings approximately, North America, some Europe, expanding globally right now. Majority customers are on that, but we did a ground up rewrite 4 years ago. We started it of the product, and now it's modular in nature. It's kind of a modern technology stack, built open APIs, interoperable with other tools and systems. We sell that product now, and we're migrating all of our old customers onto the new product and new technology called Prism. And now that we're owned, well, we can talk about that maybe separately, but now that we're owned by JLL, it's become a core part of their offering, their platform as well, and fitting into their vision for what they want to do as a company also.
Definitely, no, for sure. And one thing I was curious about is, you mentioned that the different stacks of the different tech stacks, and obviously you're on the operational layer. When you guys I'm assuming you guys interface with these different layers as well through some APIs, or how exactly are you guys communicating? Because I'm assuming as part of the operational layer, you probably have to interface in some capacity with some of these other, layers as well. Is that correct?
That is, yeah, and that's one of the drivers. There were a lot of reasons why we had to rebuild the product. Just when you're in technology, at some point, you reach the kind of end of useful life of a technology. You have to rebuild it, right, at a certain point anyway. But the other drivers were customer and market driven, and I think one of the clear things we saw in the marketplace was that with all of the investment in technology, in commercial real estate systems and technology, there's a double-edged sword of that, right? It's like, great, we have all of these products and solutions. Crap, we have all of these products and solutions. Property management companies, real estate people are not set up to manage all that, right? That's not their business. They're not skilled at buying, implementing, deploying, managing. So one of the frustrations was, we have all of these systems, they don't talk to each other. They don't share data and information, right? That was where the market was, I think, about 4 or 5 years ago. And so the demand from the providers was figure it out, figure out a way. We want to consolidate systems, or we need you to communicate well with the technology decisions we made, because information share, we shouldn't have to replicate. You always heard the term, like, there's data silos. Like, we tend to be a system of record for things like equipment in a building. Boilers, chillers, HVAC systems, right? All the major systems components. But if you're putting in a energy product, and that product requires the equipment data as well, the property management team doesn't want to build it all over again or develop it or send a spreadsheet. We should be able to share that with that other product through an API, through an integration, and with the idea of providing value to the customer to make it easier for them to get the benefit of both systems. So absolutely, sharing data up and down the stack, and then externally for all the other products out there is really important.
Absolutely. No, that's a great offering, really. And that's kind of the way that, because you can't do all the functions. It's just impossible. And so, being able to access other softwares that are in their respect best in class, and then be able to integrate with them is obviously, a phenomenal solution that you can offer your clients. That's great. One of the things I wanted to ask you is, obviously one of the value propositions that this software offers is that, it can provide the owners or whoever the client is in this particular case, an opportunity to be able to optimize their operations. And so what are some of the ways that you have seen, your clients be able to, leverage the platform to improve the NOI of a property, through, operational efficiencies or whatever else? Could you kind of describe a few of those?
Yeah, and you hit on the key value prop is always about improving net operating income. So one, can you have an impact on top line revenue, or can you help manage expenses, right? And we can do both. We have an impact on both. So one of the key things we talked about, service requests, sort of the foundational element of what we do in managing that, right? And one of the things we learned over time was that property teams were really inefficient at capturing the billable items that they're allowed to charge for when they provide service according to the terms of the leases in the building. So when we go through an implementation with our customers at any building, we go through the tenant roster, we make sure they understand, and even within a building, the leases can be different depending upon what the broker negotiated, right? In terms of what they gave away, what they will charge for and what they don't. We make sure we can We can capture all that on a tenant by tenant basis. We make sure that the management teams understand how to do things like manage what their cost basis is, but then what they're allowed to charge for a margin and a markup, and incorporate things like taxes, right? Because some things are taxable in there as well. And then build a process and a workflow notification so that they can make sure they can capture every billable item and track it during the course of servicing their building and servicing their tenants. And it's not about nickeling and diming tenants, but it is the incremental revenue can have a substantial impact on the bottom line in a building. So we have customers who are billing hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in service revenue, or millions of dollars, right? Some of our larger clients, and we make sure that they capture every single one of those dollars, and they do it at the right rate, the right margin according to the leases. And then they can have an audit trail in case tenants ever have questions about their statements, to prove that they did the work and they're charging the right amounts. So that's at the revenue side. And there's other ways we can impact it as well, but that's one example. And then on the operational side, it's about creating efficiency. So you staff a building, and this can be a little tricky because, you're talking about how many people do you need in a building to run it. We can help our customers figure that out. So how big should the maintenance team be? What's the actual volume of work that's coming through, either on a reactive or proactive basis, right? And then we try to help them figure out how to be more efficient and manage that. So that's one impact for sure, as well as track things like how much are they spending on repairs, where are there opportunities for looking at equipment that fails at a much higher rate than in one building versus another building, or within our customer base. Then if you look at something like incident tracking, one of the key things there is making sure you capture relevant information for an incident that occurs in a building, and that you've documented everything you've done. Because one of the things we've learned over time from our customers is that settlements are generally offered when the property team or the insurance company doesn't have the right information. But typically, if they do the right work up front and they mitigate their risk, they can reduce the amounts of claims that result in a loss, right? So we've had customers make significant impacts on their insurance premiums, how much they pay out, and doing all those things just through proper automated processes and information capture. So lots of examples of like that within each of our functional areas. And the newest thing, is probably in the area of energy. Our parent company, JLL, acquired an energy management product called Hank recently, and our teams are reselling that product now to our customers. And that's sensor-based protocols that overlay HVAC systems and track energy usage and spikes, and can benchmark the building, and then can indicate, you're not running this piece of equipment optimally and you're consuming too much information. Here's the recommendation for how you should change that and reduce your energy spend. So we look at all these different operational areas and figure out ways that we can help our customers improve net operating income and ultimately the value of the asset.
Absolutely. That's great. And another thing that you mentioned regarding the operational side of things, we had the privilege of interviewing Michael Beckerman, who's the CEO of CRE Tech. And one of his biggest claim or initiatives is CRE Climate, which is, it kind of describes the impact that commercial real estate has on, the broader environment. And, one thing we learned, from him is that commercial real estate actually has a bigger impact, or the built environment, I should say, has a bigger impact on climate than any other type of pollutant. So you talk about you talk about cars, you talk about other things you would think would be more impactful. The built environment is, and I'm sure that through that technology that you mentioned, with Hank, I mean, I'm sure being able to control the output of energy from these different types of systems probably makes a huge impact on that front. So the ESG part, which you mentioned earlier in the conversation, I mean, that's a big deal for a lot of companies, in particular those that you service, I'm sure.
100%. Yeah, Michael is super passionate about this initiative, and love the work he's doing. we're definitely aligned in terms of how we're thinking about it as well. Both as a parent organization, JLL has sustainability commitments and initiatives to achieve net zero status, which, is the ultimate goal for, most companies, major companies these days, particularly as a public entity, right? That's really important to their investors and to their customers and clients. So they're doing that as an organization. And then we're helping support the initiatives for their customers, for our customers, right? And making sure that we have the operational tools that help support those goals as well. And, ESG is a really big, broad topic, and people have to be really specific when they're talking about it. There's everything from the upstream reporting that has to take place, but in order to do that well and make sure that it's accurate at the building level, you have to have systems and processes and capabilities in place that allow the property teams to ultimately collect the data and information that supports accurate reporting, right? And then there's the reporting that goes to investors, underwriters. Then there's also the local, we're seeing an increase in legislative initiatives that are going to force operators' hands. It exists in New York today with Local Law 97. San Francisco has their own initiatives. Boston's starting some. So you're going to start to see more and more of that. And we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can at the asset level to support our customers' needs to comply.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And be good citizens, right? Yeah.
So outside of the ESG and all that, where do you see as the property tech as a whole going in the future, 5-10 years from now? Because I know you've been in it for quite a while, so you can kind of probably better than almost anyone kind of see the trajectory and where we're going. So
yeah, interesting. I think the next 5 years in particular are going to be really important, particularly with figuring out where commercial real estate, our focus point ends up in terms of things like back to work, right? We're still trying to figure out it's not fully post-COVID transition, but getting back to the office. So I'm here working from home. I was in the office yesterday, but there were very few people in there. We're starting to see a little bit of an uptick, and it varies by region for sure, right? We're starting to see that as well. So there's a lot of big trends going on. I think what we've seen, we're in this natural evolutionary cycle of technology. I think every technology goes through this, right? When it starts to change an industry, you start with this problem. It's a big market. There's problems technology can solve. There's a rush of money and investment that goes into it. We rode that evolutionary wave of sort of a bootstrapped founder-led company to a private equity-backed company when we hit some scale, and then sold to a large strategic acquirer. So I think what we're seeing now in general is consolidation in the market of solutions. There's too many people doing the same thing. So the natural market reaction to that from both an investor and customer standpoint is consolidating the offerings. So we're starting to do that, bringing those things together. I think the next thing we're going to see, and we're in most of these already. We're at different stages of them. Is within commercial real estate, prop tech is managing the energy question and conundrum, and making sure that the technology, which has been complicated and hard for people to adopt, making sure that the solutions are the right solutions to help the market address what they're trying to figure out. Right? How do I reduce my spend? How do I comply with legislative requirements? How do we be good corporate citizens, right? And doing all those things. Then I think the next big thing that's coming, which I touched on at the beginning when I started talking about this, is what's going to happen with all the space that's out there. How much space does the market really need? What's going to be the transition for the space? Is there going to be a 20% reduction in the amount of space that's needed by corporations? What happens to that? Does it get repurposed? I've read something recently about Class B buildings being really good fits for conversion to housing. Can you help solve housing problems by converting Class B office space, because the financial model works a little bit better, into multifamily space, right? and that reduced pressure on the housing market, the need for low income housing, right? And help the market that way. So that's a big question that I think technology will help solve. I think in the construction technology space, there's really interesting things happening in terms of condensing the design build cycle, going to like 3D modeling and 3D printing of buildings and spaces, and managing the supply chain better. You're probably experiencing all the supply chain problems right now that exists, coming out of the pandemic for construction. Can technology help solve those problems? So I think those are some of the big chunky problems that I think technology, prop tech, and CRE tech will help solve over the next several years. I think they're the things that JLL are focused on for their customers as well. There's probably some others I'm missing, but those are the big ones I think that jump out.
Yeah, it's interesting that you were saying in particular on the commercial real estate side, on the technology and how that's changing. My mind stood out as in the industrial space, where they're going in and now replacing humans with robotics and their technology, and how instead of the grand footprint, now they're just going up higher and higher to fit that same warehouse space with cubic feet, where a human, let's be honest, can't carry a whole pallet down from 3 or 4 stories and just keep working all day and night. So it's pretty interesting. I think that's going to be a huge shift, because we're in need of it. People, the whole COVID, and we don't have all the resources here and the items that we need, so let's just buy a bunch and store it. But I think we're running out of land. So
I think and that's a great example of a category that's enormous and growing. First, it's growing in terms of the need for space, because e-commerce has driven the industrial market, right? In terms of Amazon needs more warehouses, right? Everybody needs, and now it's, do you have enough people to service them? So if you move to robotics and
technology, I think that's helping lead the way. It's going to be a very intriguing, like you said, 5 years. Just to sit back and just watch or be part of, or however. But it's going to be effort.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And so first off, I just want to thank you so much, Scott, for taking the time to be with us today. It's been truly an honor. It's great to talk about this type of stuff. Obviously, I'm kind of a tech geek myself. I come from that background, so I'm just super glad we were able to touch base on this. But one of the things I wanted to ask you was related to, advice you would give to your younger self, because you've had a lot of twists and turns in your career. Obviously, you started in the hospitality space, you jumped into, your own entrepreneurial endeavors, and then got into the technology side over the last, 18 to 20 years. What are some of what is, now that you've had some 2020 hindsight, what is maybe a kernel of insight that you could provide to your younger self pertaining about the road ahead?
That's a great question. I think it's continuous improvement for me has always been kind of a mantra, and one thing I try to do and live my life. And I think time goes faster than you think it does when you're younger, right? And you think you have all this time ahead of you and you can figure things out. But I think if you can make little improvements every year, right, and improve a skill set or develop a new skill or learn something new, and continue to do that throughout your life, that really pays off, and pays off enormously, and you'll reap the dividends of that for a long, long time. As much from the kind of muscle memory of just doing it, of getting in the practice of trying to get better or learn something new. And if you can commit to doing that, that's really helpful. And I think the other thing for me was, if I went back to my younger self, it's don't be afraid to take on hard challenges, right? I think a lot of people are concerned that they don't have the skill set, or they're worried about imposter syndrome of doing something they don't understand and don't know. And I think I suffered from that a little bit when I was younger in particular, but quickly realized that I had the ability to figure things out. Even in my career path here at Building Engines, I was hired to do one job, but I eventually led sales. I led sales and marketing. I led strategy. For the past few years, I've run corporate development and M&A and building partnerships. I didn't have the traditional backgrounds and experience to do those things, but I showed along the way my ability to figure things out quickly and take on a challenge and do it and execute. And I think it's kept me employed here, and it's kept me in a career path that's allowed and created, opportunities along the way. So,
yeah,
Adaptability.
Adaptability. Yeah.
Yeah,
Huge.
that's huge. I mean, if you can get someone that is a hard worker and has adaptability, I mean, like you said, Scott, I mean, that's a big deal. And I think most of us are, but like you were saying, at a younger age, you don't truly realize that, like, hey, I can take this on. It's just, I got to put my best foot forward and just take the leap. So,
yeah. And that's why working on your mindset is so important, especially early on. Because of that fact, the imposter syndrome can hold people back from really wanting to, pursue different opportunities that may be worthwhile for them to do so. But it's that little voice in your head kind of telling you, what if this happens? What if this happens? In reality, life is all about continuous improvement, as you said. So I'm very thankful and appreciative that you shared those insights.
Absolutely.
Scott, I just want to start out saying too, we really appreciate all your insights, especially to the technology. I know that's going to be a huge factor. It already is, but like you said, in 5 years, it's really going to explode. So one of the closing out questions that we typically ask, because Raphael and I are avid readers and or Audible book listeners, and is what if you had to choose one book, and it doesn't have to pertain to technology or CRE or any of that has been the most impactful to your life in general, like that you ever read?
Yeah, that's a hard question. As an avid reader as well. Yeah, it's certainly a hard question. I think to make it relevant, I'll probably stick with the business book, but it's certainly not all the reading I do. So I tend to like a lot of different genres and different types of reading. But I'm a big fan of Ben Horowitz, who wrote The Hard Thing About Hard Things. But the book I actually like better is What You Do Is Who You Are. And I think that really resonated with me. First of all, I liked his writing style. I like the examples he gave. And I think that the core of that book in the title, to me, always just resonated, right? In that I found that with people in general. When I'm managing people, or when I'm working with someone, or I'm looking at companies, I tend to look for the evidence along the way, right? And I found that statement of what people do on a daily basis ultimately is the best insight into who they are as people, right? And actions speak louder than words. All those sorts of phrases we're comfortable with, but I think in that book, Ben does a really good job of applying it to business, and it built on The Hard Thing About Hard Things really well for me. Just in terms of the challenges of running a business and the importance of things like systems and processes and sort of the unsexy parts of operating a company that people don't pay attention to, and how the cumulative effect of the small things and the small decisions over time really ultimately determine the success of a company, or can contribute to the success of a company.
Insights. No, I've read The Hard Thing About Hard Things. Phenomenal book. I have to add that to my list. I have not read that book, so I'm definitely excited to dive in and learn, the insights shared in that. That's
Sure.
awesome. So, one thing that we like to do near rounding out the end of the podcast is we like to ask our guests to contribute to something what we call the commercial real estate treasure chest. It's a repository of resources that we make available to our audience, and people during the podcast have contributed things like helpful PDFs, Excel sheets, really anything that they believe will actually provide value to the audience. So I wanted to give you the opportunity and ask, what are you willing to contribute today?
Sure. I'd say there's a tremendous amount of resources at bldgengines.com at our website. But one of the things I want to point people to that I think aligns with one of the themes we talked about today is, where's real estate going? What are the trends? What's valuable to the marketplace and important to the customer? Is our partner page. And go to the partner section of our website, because what you'll see is the opportunities for how you can work with a company like Bldg Engines, how you can become a partner if you're a technology company. It supports the message we're giving our customers, in that we're open, we're interoperable. We want to deliver value to you as a customer, even if there might be a competing piece of functionality we have, but you want a best in breed client or product, and you've already been working with them and you want us to work with them, we will do that, right? We're always going to do what's in the best interest of the customer. And that aligns really well with our parent company as well. That's what JLL is all about. It's always about doing what's in the best interest of the customer. And we have this tremendous tech stack that we own and we control. We also partner really, really well. And I think that's a great place for people to start about, learning about how they can work with us.
Absolutely. And we have a commercial real estate we have a commercial real estate treasure chest page. And so what we'll do is we'll add the link to the partners page to that as well. And we'll include it in the show notes below. So if you guys are watching this in a YouTube format, it'll be in the description below. And if you guys are listening to this in an Apple podcast format, go ahead and go to the description and you'll be able to access that.
Scott, it's been wonderful. Everything's been very insightful, especially in the CRT tech realm and the future and past and everything. I think you rounded off very nicely. So if someone wanted to know more or just get in touch with you and know more about you, how would you like them to contact you?
Email's an easy way. So ssidman@bldgengines.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Scott Sidman, and Twitter. So the usual social media channels. Feel free to reach out and connect. Always happy to talk to people who are interested in CRE tech, either as a potential buyer of technology or someone who's in the space and trying to figure out how they can work with Bldg Engines or JLL now. And always happy to have those conversations, share ideas.
Phenomenal. Yeah. And for those of you guys who are listening, as like I said before, we'll include all those links and emails and links to his LinkedIn and everything else in the show notes. So if you guys are watching this on YouTube, feel free to go to the description below and you'll be able to see it. And as well, if you're listening to this in Apple Podcast, Spotify, or whatever other podcast format you're listening to that, it's going to be in the description as well. So again, thank you all so much for stopping by. We greatly appreciate it. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, if you could like and subscribe to this channel, it really helps the YouTube algorithm, ensures more and more people can hear this message. If you guys are listening to this in an Apple Podcast format, Spotify, whatever else, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review. We've seen a significant uptick in our downloads as a result of you guys engaging with the podcast and leaving 5-star reviews. So if you guys don't mind taking a second to be able to do that, that we'd greatly appreciate it. So thank you all so much for stopping by, and we'll see you all next time.